Welcome to another episode of Tanstwocents Podcast. Today's episode is titled Get Out of My Head, and we'll explore overthinking and analysis paralysis in the GovCon industry. I'm your host, Tanwilson, and with us here today is Melvin Mooring II, a seasoned professional development expert and strategist in government contracting, who will share his insights on this topic. Melvin, thanks for joining us here today, and please say hello to our listeners, who we call the Intellectuals, and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. Hello, audience. My name is Melvin Mooring II, founder of Polished Technologies. We started off doing web design with development, and then full on started adding on management consulting. And that's kind of where we bring us here today about how to, streamline your business and mostly in the tech industry as well.
So tell us a little bit about your business. How long have you been in business? What made you start your business?
Oh wow. It was a necessity because I kept seeing that, and I'll just be honest, I felt like I could do it as well. So I might as well have, jump out here and try, right? So we do software, after we went down the rabbit hole of API development, software development, as well as data management, and again adding that PMO, management consulting, aptitude to it as well. And that next thing you know, we're getting contracts. And so it ended up being a necessity where I'm like, well, I have to grow this thing now. I can't do it all by myself.
Yeah.
So that's really
No.
how we got here.
And that's a very similar journey to a lot of people who start their own business, and I can definitely appreciate that. But this topic here today, I love. I know we're all in our heads too much and stuff, but before we get into like the meat of all of it, I want to kind of like pick your brain a little bit and ask you if you could share a pivotal moment in your career when you realized that you were overthinking, which could really be a
Hmm.
roadblock to strategic decision making. We overthink all the time, and we're going to talk a lot in this episode about the Gauge report and different studies. But previously, Gartner, for example, had a study that found that like 65% of our decisions take longer than they should. So can you relate to this? How does this, like impact or, has an influence on in the GovCon sector where you and I both work?
Absolutely. So, I kind of define analysis paralysis in that way, as, trying to dot the I's and the T's a little too much, a little too boldly, and a
Mhm.
little, maybe some of the I's and T's that aren't even there. Um, so gosh, decisions definitely do take longer when there's fear involved.
Yeah.
If you failed before, or whatever that means for you, failed, right? If you failed before, if you've, you didn't get that, you may have not got that, after the BAFO, you didn't get the actual win, right? Like something like that, like something like that is still in your head, and you have to get out of your head in that way, right? And to keep moving forward. Otherwise, the business will fail. And those
Yeah.
things usually happen in those first couple of years where you're trying to figure out, am I doing the right thing? Did I do this correctly? What are the compliance things I didn't make? You can start going down that rabbit hole, and next thing you know, for the next proposal, you're in that cycle of overthinking because of the failure.
Yeah, and it is hard to play the blame game, right? Like, we always kinda wanna, like, overly blame ourselves, um, and so that's not a productive place to kind of be. So,
Exactly.
this is great start to our conversation here, so we're gonna go break straight into our first segment, which is defining analysis paralysis. And so, like you said, like, we all kinda define it a little differently, but I always like to start conversations off with level setting, an understanding of what does that look like in the GovCon world. So let's be a little technical here about GovCon and areas and ways that we would define analysis paralysis in our industry.
I mean, the first and foremost is if you can't get a contract unless you bid. I mean, according to FAR. You could literally, but so just the go and no go hesitations that you have when you're analyzing a doc. I mean, don't get me wrong, you do need to look at it thoroughly for any gotchas. Oh, we actually don't have that capability, or we don't do this. That's fine. But once you start trying to second guess, correction, trying to guess on what the contract officer is looking for, what are their numbers, what is this program person doing, and you're starting to go down the rabbit hole of what are these contract terms that are good for me, but will they like it? Oh no! Like once you start getting into again the fear factor of okay, I lost this one because of this. Let me, instead of trying to improve on it, you're overthinking and saying, what if this happens again? Let me try to mitigate something that may not even be there. What it looks like in the GovCon space is definitely first off the no and go no go decisions. And then of course the partnerships. Oh, I got burned in the past. Let me be extra cautious and not be so forthcoming, which is fine. It's good to keep some things close to the chest, but if it's detrimental to the team, if you're not giving your past performance for the proposal to the other team, then I don't know how you're supposed to be on the contract, right? And then that of course will lend itself to people not trusting you, and not just the people you're trying to work with, but your own team too. That kind of hesitation definitely permeates throughout your business and your team. As the old saying goes, it snakes things from the head, right? So if you or one of your leads is being hesitant and is fear based and they're overthinking and they're kind of going through their analysis paralysis cycle of hesitation and overanalyzing, just think of every possibility that can go wrong, or finding, as a lot of people say, finding the problem for every solution. Once you start seeing that a little more, your own team is going to start kind of doubting you, and then you may or may not have some of those team members anymore, that kind of stuff. So that's what it looks like from my perspective, especially from the GovCon space, in the GovCon space.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a couple of points that I see a lot when I consult with certain customers. Um, Partnerships and being burnt in the past. Those are two really common themes. Like um, some customers, if they're burnt, they kind of brush it off. They live and learn. You move on, and you learn from your mistakes, and you kind of move on. Other people, they stay there. And then they don't trust anybody, and then they kind of broad stroke that. It's one thing to kind of do it externally with partners, but I've also seen it kind of internalized too within an organization. You have to trust your people. You have to be very transparent. So it's almost kind of like one of these things where we talk a lot about transparency in partnerships, transparency within our own organizations. And it's like, how do you do that when you don't feel like you have a certain level of trust?
Right. And
So, yeah.
it's I honestly say, if we're talking about feelings and how fear can kind of bring this all on and getting out of our own heads, it is a gut feeling of being able to trust
Mhm.
people. And once you get out of your own head, honestly, I'm going to say that throughout this whole segment. Sorry. Once you get out of your own head, it's then after that, you're like, okay, so is it me? It's not us now. Now that we're out of our own head, we know that there's something here that doesn't feel right or feels familiar when I did get burned. Now that is okay, I think. I mean, that's a healthy amount of. I have a little doubt about this. Here's why. They claim they've had this past performance, but when I looked in FPDS, it's not there. When I looked at USA spending, it's not there. Those are real tangible things you can hold on to. That's not over analyzing. That's just literally analyzing. When you start over analyzing, is hey, they didn't write this paragraph the way I wanted them to. I don't want to be in this partnership. This happened before because,
Right.
and then you start going down the daisy chain of what happened before. So
Yeah.
there's a balance, of course, but
Exactly. And so no, I was totally agreeing with you. And I think that that kind of goes back to my favorite saying by Ronald Reagan is trust but verify, right? And so I always try to put myself into that situation because a lot of times I do come into a scenario where my customer is not wanting to trust or not wanting to believe. And so they're very skeptical. They're very, like and we all have our own baggage, right? And sometimes they're valid. Sometimes they're valid concerns because they, like I believe in intuition. I'm a hugely intuitive person. It's like, ooh, if it doesn't feel like there's like spidey senses are going off, right? And so I think there's, some people are too analytical, other people are too sensitive, and so it's like striking that balance. I think um, is how we try to try to overcome analysis paralysis, but I think we all kind of face it and come at it from our own, perspective and challenges.